I'm Brian Freise alongside Laura Duncan, and you're listening to the Triggered and True podcast. This is a podcast that's all about you, discovering you, going back for you, being with you. You're more than the pain you've experienced, the behaviors you're expressing, and the thoughts that run through your head. Together, we will find your true self, which has always been with you. It's just been covered up. Tune in as we show you how to feel your pain, get comfort, and go play as you return to you. It's time to transform from triggered to true. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Triggered and True. Hello, Laura. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah. It feels like it's been a minute since we recorded a podcast since all the holidays and everything.
Yeah, for last month we were early, and for this month we're a little late on the recording. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Sorry, guys. No, it'll
Yeah.
be out at the same time, I think.
So today's topic is derived from a reader question, or a listener, a listener. I guess people don't read the podcast, they listen to the podcast.
Yeah. But
So
they can't see it.
yes. So
They
a
can't watch
listener,
it through YouTube. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So a listener question came in, and it got me to thinking, a little bit more about a topic we had touched on many episodes ago, all the way back on episode 9. And it was around the concept of the knowledge of good and evil. And something you had shared with me very early in my journey of meeting with you, of how the knowledge of good and evil is the ultimate source of all pain,
Yep.
all anxiety, all
Yep.
depression. It all traces
Yeah.
it back to its ultimate roots in the knowledge of good and evil. And so we've also talked a lot about through these episodes that Christian faith is not a requirement in any way, shape, or form to benefit from the compassion method. So any faith, any persuasion,
Hmm.
faith, no faith, whatever, you're going to
This is a human
definitely, this
experience.
is a
Yeah.
human experience. You are going to receive some mighty, mighty, wonderful things by embarking on this compassion method process. So it's not a requirement, but undoubtedly your Christian faith, Laura, has had a profound impact on shaping the compassion method. So why don't you just share a little bit about how your faith intertwines with
Yeah.
the foundations and the makings of the compassion method?
Yeah. I think I'll start by, talking about my faith, but I probably will lead into kind of how this directly connects to the knowledge of good and evil as well. So my faith was definitely, and it is, strong. I, believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I've, been a Christian my whole entire life, raised in a Christian home, and really saw just, the reality of God and saw that he was real and alive and that it was tangible. And actually, I saw it was tangible because that's how my mom lived her life. But I didn't actually experience the tangibility of God until I was 18 years old. When I was young, I used to go lay on my mom's side of the bed and pray and ask God to show himself to me. And
Mm,
my mom and dad were both Christians, but my mom's faith was just a lot more expressive and dynamic. And so God seemed so real through her. And so I'd lay on her side of the bed and I would pray and I would ask God to show himself to me. And nothing would happen. Nothing would happen until I was 18. And when I turned 18, it doesn't mean that I still considered myself a Christian. I still went to church. I still believed. I still had faith. But I was looking for a tangible presence of God. And the compassion method is directly connected to that because when I experienced God at 18, it was tangible. It was essence, like we talk about sometimes with the compassion method. It was God was real to me, and I felt his love and I felt his connection, and I felt like he was real, just like a human. It felt so real, even though it was not tangible. And as I journeyed through life, I was able to, I had a strong relationship with God, but I had these parts of myself that were still lonely. I remember being happily married, I had 4 great kids, had my faith, life was good. But then I would bump up against this loneliness and I would just be like, this doesn't make sense. I have all the things, both spiritually, practically. I have all the things that should make me feel like I'm, satisfied, fulfilled, content. But I still had this loneliness inside of me that I didn't know what it was. It was just this dissatisfied empty, lonely feeling. And so I would struggle with it, and it would ebb and flow. Sometimes it'd be stronger, sometimes it would be less. But when I discovered the compassion method, I recognized that I was lacking the tangibility of human love in certain ways that I hadn't experienced. And even though I had everything that looked so good, and this was before my husband passed away, this was before he even was sick, I had everything that looked right, but I didn't have the tangible presence of God, of humans, in the way that I really needed it to actually heal that loneliness. And so
Hmm.
that actually intensified my faith because I was able to connect with God in some of the ways that I wasn't able to connect with him before.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. So what about the concept of good and evil? So how do you
Mm-hmm.
relate that? How do you relate that back?
Yes. So even though I was looking for that tangible love, and that's what I feel like the compassion method was able to help me connect to with humans and with God spiritually as well, um, the hindrance of my connection with God and the loneliness I had was also directly connected to my belief that when you were good, God and others loved you. And when you were bad, God and others didn't love you. And I always saw it as like holding hands with like, a human or with God holding hands. And then when you do something bad, the bond is broken. And then you have to do good. You have to, you have to say you're sorry. You have to do good to repair, to be reconnected again. And so it's this push, pull, push, pull, push, pull. And it was this constant thing that I experienced from a very young age that I believe led to that loneliness because it was disconnection, because it was conditional and it was contingent on my behavior. And it was contingent on if I was good, I got that love and connection and that attachment. But if I was bad, I got detachment.
So how does this relate back to the biblical story of the knowledge of good and
Yeah,
evil in the trees
definitely.
in the garden? Maybe just
Yep.
for someone
Yeah.
that might be unfamiliar or anyone that might need to see it from maybe a little bit different perspective.
Yeah, I know I did. I read a lot of the Bible and so much more of just like reading stories and not really connecting to the reality of it, just especially because it's happened like so long ago and it's just stories and they're supposed to. I thought the Bible was there to teach us how to be better, to be good.
How to be good.
Yeah, I didn't know that the Bible, it sounds really like duh, but like I didn't realize that the Bible was there to bring attachment and connection to God and relationship. I thought it was to a list of things to do to get better. So when I would read about the knowledge of good and evil, I would look at it as I can't believe how bad they were. I
Hmm.
can't believe Eve ate that fruit. I can't believe Adam followed her. And I would shame them in my mind when I would read that story originally. And I was
Hmm.
like, they're horrible and they ruined it for all of us. So now we have to live in the same way. They're really, really bad. So that's actually how I read that story before. But now when I read the story, so if you go back to the story, Adam and Eve, Adam was in the garden. God created Eve to be with Adam. This is a little bit of a side note, but to be with Adam, not to do for Adam, because God was already with Adam. He had his heart was full of love. He just didn't have another human of his kind to be able to be with him. So God creates Adam to be with him. They're in the garden. He says, do whatever you want. You have full reign. Just do not eat of the knowledge of good and evil tree. And they go, and Eve is tempted by the serpent in the garden. And he says, this is actually key. Sorry, I kind of feel like I'm going to talk for a minute, but it's going to be good. but,
No, go ahead. This is
yeah.
good.
But this is really key. So because I was thinking how bad she was, how stupid she was, that she would believe the serpent. I even thought like she had a relationship with God and she did that. I can't believe her. But when you look at how he deceived her, he actually deceived her through pain.
Hmm.
Because, I don't know what the time frame was between Adam being in the garden, Eve being there, but I kind of look at it as he chose Eve because she had less relationship and connection with God because she was created second, or that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And so when he deceives her, he says three things that are very key that I think we still struggle with today. He said, God is lying to you. He isn't who you think he is. And you need to eat this fruit. You need to have the knowledge of good and evil to protect yourself.
Hmm.
And so she eats of the fruit, and her eyes are open, and she feels shame for the first time. She believes that she is evil, because she now has the knowledge of evil. And then Adam does the same. They go and they hide in the bushes or hide and they cover themselves and they hide from God. And this is very key. God comes. I said this before. He could have said, wow, you screwed up. I don't want to be any connection to you. So I'm going to go and I'm going to send an angel to go and tell you to leave. But God was not afraid of their knowledge of good and evil. He wasn't afraid of their mistake. He wasn't afraid of their sin. And so he came to them and said, why are you hiding? Even though he probably already knew what was happening because he's God. But they made excuses, they hid, they were in shame. But he was actually wanting to restore relationship because he still saw them for who they were, not for what they did. And then everyone goes, okay, well, then they got kicked out of the garden. That's what I thought too. But he actually protected them because in the knowledge of good and evil, if they would have eaten from the tree of life, they would have been stuck permanently in the pain and chaos of the knowledge of good and evil. So he had them leave to protect them from eating of the tree of life so they wouldn't be stuck like that for eternity. So it was actually love and protection that he sent them out. And yes, there was consequences, just like there is consequences for all of our mistakes and our sins. But the consequence that's very, very key, the consequence was for what they did. The consequence wasn't against who they were. God still protected them and kept and took care of them all the way up to Jesus coming, all the way up to today, because he loved them and he saw them for who he was. They're his creation, his perfect creation, even though they made mistakes.
Yeah. There's a lots of depth there. And I think what you're talking about, we get taught these stories, or those that grew up in the Christian faith get taught these stories as little kids, and they become almost like nursery rhymes. And you don't recognize the depth that's there.
So
And
much there.
here's what the depth is. So if knowledge of good and evil is the source of all pain, that's a pretty big statement.
Yeah.
So talk about how that is the source of the pain.
Well, if you bring it back to what I was saying in the beginning when I was talking about my faith with God and how my faith with God was contingent, just like Adam and Eve's was contingent. I had to be better to cover myself, to be good, to be loved. And that kept me from being able to fully receive the love that God had for me and also the love that other humans had for me. And so, what's the opposite of love? The opposite of love, I think, is hell, honestly. Like, I think the opposite of love is utter emptiness. I mean, think about your most desperate moment.
Not
where you
connected.
felt
No
so
connection.
empty, no connection, no life, like no water, no food, no connection, emptiness, darkness. I mean, that is just the worst possible place to be in. And that is what the knowledge of good and evil introduced us to.
And you've talked about the knowledge of good is as detrimental as the knowledge of evil. And a lot
Yeah.
of people maybe wouldn't connect that, but talk about
Yeah.
how this creates like this energy inside of us that we're constantly
Yes.
processing.
Yeah. I commonly use the word frantic with that energy. It's a frantic energy to always be better, to be okay, to be loved, to be connected. And so when we look at it, the tree wasn't called the knowledge of evil tree, that they were good and then they ate of the evil tree and then they knew evil, but they were already good. But the tree is called the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil because they were neither good nor evil. They had no knowledge of good or evil. That doesn't mean that they didn't make any mistakes or anything. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't talk about that. But that doesn't mean that they didn't. It just means that they didn't have any knowledge of both evil and good. And to me, the reason why I say that good is sometimes more detrimental than evil is because when we are trying to be good, we cannot, and we're trying to avoid evil. That's the frantic energy that you're talking about. That's the frantic energy. We always have to be good. And even when you're as good as you possibly can be and you climb the ladder of good to the top, you're the best and you're the goodest, and you are just such a good, Christian, good spouse, good child, good employee, good boss, good whatever it is, and you get there guess what happens? What goes up must come down. So
Right.
eventually, you're not going to be able to maintain your status. You're going to make a mistake. Something's going to happen. Whether you intentionally do or you don't intentionally do, you're going to make a mistake. So then you're going to go back down and be connected to evil and have to climb that ladder all the way up again.
Well, and that kind of comes back to an age-old philosophical question. Are humans really the best judges of what is good versus what is evil?
I think that's a really good one. I think we all think we're really good judges of what's good. But, as I've gone this journey, it's really a question. Obviously there's like the big sins and like, murder. I think Christian or non-Christian, we can all agree that murdering someone is not good. But there's certain things that we say are good that actually, who said? Who said
Right.
that that was good? That we live our whole lives based on that and we judge others based on that when who said?
There's a quote from a book, The Shack, that I think is really good, and it talks about he says humans have a great capacity for calling something good or evil without truly knowing, and to make things more confusing, that which you determine to be good will change over time and
Mm-hmm.
circumstance.
Yeah,
Maybe lying is bad in one circumstance, but good in another. So who judges that?
I know.
And then beyond that, and even worse, there are billions of you, each determining what is good and what is evil. So when your good and evil clash with your neighbors, fights and arguments ensue and even wars break out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I
Well, I
think
know. I
a
was even thinking. I just said that murder is obviously not good, but I was thinking, like, what about like Braveheart and the movies that where his wife is
yeah,
killed and he goes out and he redeems, and we're all like clapping. We're like, he's
yeah,
so good.
yes, yeah, exactly. So, and I think a lot of times, human beings weren't designed to be the arbiters of good and evil. That wasn't what
No,
we
no,
were
I don't
supposed
think.
to do,
Yeah,
evidently. So, and I,
especially through the knowledge of good and evil, if that makes sense. We're
yeah.
judging through the knowledge of good and evil, not through love, not through wisdom, not through understanding.
Well, you're right, because a lot of our judgments are not coming from our true selves, they're coming from our triggered
Yes.
selves.
Yep, exactly. That's what majority of judgment comes from. Unrighteous judgment comes from our triggered self.
Yep. And we're making these decisions from our pain and our
Mm-hmm.
unmet need,
Yep.
not from who we were created to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this energy, this constantly processing, I kind of envision it kind of like a computer that has like malware or something like that that's running on it, and it's like constantly sucking energy and constantly draining resources from
Yes.
other applications.
Mm-hmm. Gets a lot
And
of attention.
yeah, and that's what's happening inside of us with this frantic energy
Yes.
that you're talking about,
Yeah.
where we're constantly trying to, am I good enough? Am I enough? Am
Yes.
I doing
Yeah.
enough?
And it
And
starts so young, like talk to like a 5-year-old, maybe even younger, but talk to a 5-year-old. They're already working that system. Think about when someone says, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" It's already implying that, it's all about what you're going to do.
and ultimately, as Christians, we believe what Jesus died to give us and what the compassion method is teaching people to embrace is the freedom to live by a different system.
Yeah. And that's what
We,
Jesus came for too,
right, exactly.
So much of that lines up with him saying that's the old way of doing things, but we're still stuck in the old way of doing things.
So you've said things before that we can't eat from both trees.
Mm-hmm.
So you've made a statement before. I've heard you say that we cannot eat from both trees, and kind of explain what that means.
Yeah. Well, your uncle actually has a really, I don't know if he shared that with you recently, not to go off on a tangent, but
Hmm.
Uncle Ron, he shared a really cool thing about that same concept, but based on not being able to eat from both trees and how if you're eating from the knowledge of good and evil, that will be your system that you live by. Because that's what you
Yeah.
ate, that's what you ingested, that's in your system, literally. And that's what you're eating, and that's what you're digesting, and that's what you're living by. So when you think about the tree of life is not the knowledge of good and evil. So the tree of life is, I kind of look at it, if we think of it in a biblical context, I think of like the fruit of the spirit, you know, patience, love, kindness. I can't remember all of them,
Mm-hmm.
but like I see it more like that. That's the tree of life. And so as we are ingesting those things and as we're connected to our true self and we're connected to who God created us to be and also who God is, we are living in those places. You from that place, eating from the tree of life, you're going to live a quote unquote good life, but not because you're living it because of the knowledge of good and evil. You're living it as a byproduct of the tree of life.
Yeah, you're living it as a byproduct of being filled with love, being
Exactly.
being
And so
filled with
you are,
compassion.
yes,
Yeah, being filled
yes.
with your needs met, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't give away to anybody else what you don't have living inside of you.
No.
So as a default, like you don't have to try to live by the Spirit. You will just
Yeah.
live by the Spirit because it'll come gushing out of you.
Exactly. And I kind of look at the knowledge of good and evil kind of like a little bit like the spyware you're talking about, but like, like a poison apple or something like that. That's like stealing from us the deficiencies. Because you can have, the knowledge of good and evil presents itself as love to a certain degree. You know what I mean? Like if you do good, you're going to be loved and people smile and people accept you.
Well,
And you're like, okay,
you've
good.
also described it as a safety for us.
Yes, exactly. It
It
feels
it feels
safe to have
safe.
those boundaries of, okay, if I do the right thing, I'm not going to get hurt. I'm not going to hurt others. I can feel safe in this. And so it does feel safe. And it gives us certain feelings that mimic the tree of life. That's why we want it so much because it's actually feeding us, but it's actually hurting us at the same time that it's feeding us.
Well, and it's a bit like we're using it to try to control our
Mhm.
external world.
Yes,
Like if
definitely. That's where
I
all blame comes from.
see, like what I really learned at the base of like my learning, like when I first came to you, I thought my external world was like the strongest thing in the universe. Like
Yeah.
external was so big and inside, and I was so little. And
Yeah.
so much of your teaching is about teaching that no, 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 your internal world is the stronger.
Yes.
And to me, the knowledge of good and evil, if I lived by that system, it was my attempt to make the external world controllable. So
Yes,
if I
exactly.
if I do the right things,
Mm-hmm.
the external world will fall into place
Mm-hmm. And then I'll be safe.
and then I'll be safe. And that's
Yes.
the thing, like that's just not reality. And I think that's what
No.
gets a lot of people twisted in their faith is they think,
Yeah.
okay, I do these things. We're
Yes.
trying to judge good and evil and we're judging
Yes.
what's going on is,
Well, think about that age old question. Why do bad things happen to good people? If
yeah,
I do
because
everything
right.
right, I should always be okay. And every single person listening to this call knows that no matter how good you are, it
Nope.
does not control your external world. Things will happen to us. We will experience pain and we will suffer regardless of how good we are.
Yeah, in this world, there's much tribulation to be had for all.
Yeah. And that's again coming back to what you just said. That's why our internal world being strong and full we will be able to go through anything. I think of Stephen in the Bible being stoned to death, and he was so full of love that he could forgive them, but he could also be okay and be at peace even unto
Hmm.
death. I mean, that is an extraordinary inner world that, yes, 100% came from God and his connection with God. But we know that it had to be not bigger than God, but it had to be connected. You can't just in your mind say, think about if we were being stoned right now and we said in our mind, God is good and I'm okay. We're not going to, in the moment, we're not going to believe that
Right.
unless it's actually abiding in us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's only going to be abiding in us to the degree that we have our pain comforted.
Yeah.
Because if we're hurting on the inside, we'll push away
Yeah.
the very life that God's trying to give us. Like
Yeah.
we'll push it
Exactly.
away. We'll push it right
Yep.
out of the way.
And it'll be temporal, or it'll be based
Yep.
on our external world.
It'll be based on the
Yeah.
system of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yep.
It'll be based on that old
Yep.
system.
And
Yeah.
that circles back to the knowledge of good and evil produces shame, and shame produces blame. So we stay, as we are in that perpetual cycle of good and evil, we're actually in the perpetual cycle of shame and blame.
Mhm. Yeah, we're either dumping the blame on ourselves or we're
Mm-hmm.
blaming the world around us. And
Yeah.
yeah,
One very clear sign that you're stuck in knowledge of good and evil is your level of blame.
Hmm. There was we kind of returning to that kind of the knowledge of good and evil as a safety. There was something that you said that I had written in my notes. You talked about how when God told you there was no good or bad, that it upset you because you had prided yourself on having no sin in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I laugh now, but
Yeah.
yes.
That was your
Well,
safety. And you kind of
yeah.
you alluded to that at the beginning, how
Yeah.
you were mad at Eve.
Yeah.
Whereas I
No,
was like, I'm
I
just
was
glad.
working that system.
See, this is so interesting because like you were contextualizing it a different way. Me, I was like thankful that I wasn't there because I'd have done the same thing and worse. Or
Yeah.
scared that I
Well,
would have, you know?
we we approach it from different ways.
Yeah, I
Same
was
route,
like,
but we see it from different
I'd
ways.
have been even more bad.
I was so good at being good. I was like, I can't believe them. We shame others based on how much we feel like we've mastered good.
Yep. And you talked about how part of how you served God was by getting all the points.
Yep, exactly. I felt like like every time I was being good, I was getting these points. I was building those up. And then it just felt like, okay, I literally said to God when he said, you know, good and bad doesn't matter. I was like, then why have I been doing everything I've been doing? Like I actually felt like so upset. I was like, I should have just gone out and done whatever and just gone crazy and been bad because you said good and bad doesn't even matter. It actually really upset me because I was like, then why was it I doing all this? And he's like, yeah, why were you doing all that?
Because
Why were you being so good?
you were being driven by that system.
Exactly. And that false comfort of if I'm good, I'm loved and I'm okay. And no, and I promise you, judgment's connected to it. At the time, if you would have asked me, I've been like, no, it's wrong. I'm not judging, it's wrong. But my heart, because I was so connected to the knowledge of good and evil, that when I could do good, I would look at other people and say, why are they so
Well,
bad?
exactly. You judged Eve.
Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
She'll
I
have
was
a
like, I can't
someday she'll
believe
have a
her.
conversation with you. Like, you were
Oh no,
pretty
I
hard on
don't.
me, Laura. I mean, if you would have
No,
been there, I think you'd have done the same thing.
no. Yeah, that's what we talk about, self-righteousness. I laugh now because I can't even believe I thought that, but that's how I saw it.
Well, that's where they were. And you said like it was a comfort, but it was a false comfort. And
Yeah.
when we're comforting ourselves outside of like what brings true comfort, like what we teach in
Yes.
the compassion method
Yes.
about having self-compassion,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to comfort the pain, but then ultimately learning how to get our needs met through the 10
Exactly.
gifts.
And I wasn't getting those, Matt. I was
Right.
very empty and lonely, even though I was on top of the good mountain.
So false comfort costs you something because what it costs
Yes.
you is true healing.
Yes. True healing, true love. I did not have true love because it was conditional.
Yeah. And maybe this never happened to you, but when I was trying to keep points, I would always feel like I didn't have enough points. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like those shame highs. I did really
Mm-hmm.
good today. I'm on top of the world. Or
Yes.
I
Yep.
got kind of upset with the kids today. I'm on the bottom of the world. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of in this ever ending. I think
I
you
still
called
went
it.
through that. I just felt like my good points were higher than my bad points. So it's not like I never did anything wrong,
Yeah.
but I didn't have anything that I felt like I was intentionally doing wrong. And then a lot of times the things I would do wrong, I'd be like, well, like I didn't mean to. People a lot of times say, like, I didn't mean to. I didn't try to do that. It's just what happened, or things like that. You make a lot of excuses and a lot of blame because you're trying to
Mhm.
protect the good points.
So we're kind of just hitting what we talk about, like triggers and our true self, our triggered self. We're just kind of hitting it from a different angle because ultimately we're saying the same thing. So when we talk about being triggered, we're saying, hey, when you're in that triggered state, you're actually living by this other system.
Yeah.
Okay. And God didn't design us to live by that system. The compassion method is a way it's kind of to me like a bridge to help us live
Mm-hmm.
by the system
Yeah.
that brings life,
Yes.
the life-giving system.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about, a little bit about how we get set free. And I think the first part is just the awareness of,
Mm-hmm.
hey, maybe there's another way to live life than keeping points.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe maybe there is no scoreboard like I think,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first step to being open to like,
Yes.
perhaps I am still living by that system that,
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly, like I just said, that's exactly what God said to me.
mhm.
That good and bad is not what it's about. And it shook me because I was so unaware.
So you said to me once, you said the system can only stop when we recognize the shame and knowledge of good and evil attached to it.
Yeah.
Like that's the only way we can get it to
Yep.
stop.
And I
So we
think,
can
and I kind of
stop
look,
blaming
yeah,
and shaming ourselves.
exactly. Yep. And
Yeah.
I think I kind of look at shame. I mean, shame is universal, of course, but I believe that we all have our own unique flavor of shame based on our early childhood development and how the knowledge of good and evil was, how that system was in place during our coding. I call our early childhood development our coding. And it was teaching us by that system. And we all got taught a little bit different. Even how you approached Eve eating the apple and how I approached Eve eating the apple came from both of our early childhood development
Yeah.
perspectives. So the awareness, like you said, number one, but then what's your flavor of shame? And your flavor of shame will always come from your pain and your lack. And so being able to recognize, and what is shame says what you do is who you are. So whatever that doing means in your system, that is going to be your shame. And for
Hmm.
every home, there's a different emphasis. And so when you find that emphasis, you're able to recognize, okay, that's my shame.
Hmm.
That's what shame looks like for me. This is where I believe I am what I do, where others are what they do.
We've talked about this before, but one of the 10 gifts from what you were describing that was kind of landing here, one of the 10 gifts that I always felt deficient in, or that I recognized as very deficient, was being enough.
Yeah.
And so that created a very low sense of self-value and self-worth
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because I didn't feel like I was enough. And it probably shades,
Yeah.
how I read that story.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
of
That you're
course I
interpreting
would
it
have
through that
done, of
lens.
course I would have did what Eve did because I'm not enough. I
Yes,
couldn't be trusted. I
exactly.
wouldn't be enough for
Yes.
that moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's my flavor of shame.
Yeah. And I guess I'd say, just thinking off the top of my head, I hadn't thought about this before. I would say, um, I feel like my shame would to a certain degree be, there's probably other components to it too, but the one I'm thinking of right now, based on how I saw Eve, was not being seen. I was seen for being a good girl. My nickname was Beamer because I was happy. So I
Yep.
was seen for this happy, good girl that brought joy to others.
Because
So that's how I was
if you were
seen.
that, then you would feel seen. Because
Yes, then I
yeah,
would feel seen,
right.
but I wasn't really being
Feeling. No,
seen.
you weren't really feeling seen.
Yes,
You just it was
exactly. Because I was,
a band-aid.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep, it was a band aid. And so I'm looking at it as you're loved if you do good and if you're happy and all these things, but I really wasn't being seen. If I could have been seen in my entirety, I could have seen Eve more clearly,
Hmm.
which obviously Eve is a reflection of all of us.
Yeah,
We read the
totally.
story, but we are
Right.
actually all Eve. We're all
100%.
Adam. We're all subject to the pain of when we believe that God isn't who he said he is, and the pain of we have to protect ourselves from that.
Hmm. Yeah. And you and I have had some interesting talks too about some different biblical characters, and one of them being David. And
Mm-hmm.
the his story is really particularly messy. It's
Yeah, he
and
definitely had some
not
bad in his life.
not only is it messy, I don't know, I'd have to double check this, but I don't know that there's many biblical characters that you have more of their story written
That's true.
than
That's
his.
really true. I
Like
didn't even think about that.
there
No,
is
he's
a
definitely,
lot written
and a
about his
lot written,
story.
not just about facts, but more from like a personal way too, like his personal story, his personal thoughts, the personal things he did.
And the personal crappy things he did.
Yes,
You know, the
exactly.
things that
Yeah.
it's like, okay, yeah, he did some really cool things, but I think that if you were keeping points, the points on the bad things he
Yeah.
did would outweigh the good things he did.
Yes, yes,
But you
exactly.
said something to me that was really profound and it was freeing for me because I would actually read about David and it kind of freak me out a little bit. Because I'd be like, um, I'm like, even David didn't have it together. So if my world can only be okay by having all of my ducks in a row, and these biblical characters can't even get their ducks in a row, how am I ever going to get my ducks in a row? See,
Yeah.
that's how I looked at David, and it kind of freaked me out. But you gave me a different perspective. And your perspective was, you said, this is your quote, you said, through David, God is breaking the knowledge of good and evil. So God, because he's clearly doing things that you would look at as being not good, right? And he said he was a man after his own heart. So in ways, God contradicted himself. He wasn't looking at David's behavior. If he was only looking at David's behavior, he wouldn't have been able to say that. But he saw past the behavior to who David was,
Yeah.
which he's able to do that for all of us. And I think that's so
Hmm.
refreshing that the Bible does share all of the uck of David's life,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
God saw past that to who David was
Yeah.
and helped call that out of him, so to
Yeah.
speak. So,
That actually, when you were saying how like one of your, childhood areas of shame was not feeling like you're not enough because you lack the gift of knowing that you are enough. When you think about David's life, even before he made bad decisions, remember he
yeah,
was chosen to go and fight Goliath when he was so small.
right.
And you went through all the brothers, and they're like, "Don't take him. He's the smallest and the least. He couldn't even wear the armor. He couldn't even do anything." And
Yeah.
how God saw who he was, separate from even if he was enough during that time too. So not just that he was, God saw his heart. He was a man after God's own heart, even in his sin, but also even in his deficiencies. God still saw him and still saw that that's who he was. It's
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I can look at that not so much. It doesn't freak me out like it used to. It's more of a freeing thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know. And but what's also hopeful to us is that it's pretty obvious from the Bible too that David never learned how to live free.
Yeah.
He never did fully,
Yeah.
like, it was just like a learning that he didn't have. He
Yeah.
didn't have that.
Mm-mm.
And he didn't have the resources available to help teach him how to learn to
Yeah.
live free. And you've talked about, so that's kind of how I want to land today is like, okay, we're getting this awareness. And if you've been listening to the podcast any amount of time, I mean, you're definitely probably well into the awareness phase. Like you're aware that, hey, there's might be a different way to live. I'm living
Yeah.
by a system that's a bit faulty. And, but then how do I live free? And ultimately, this is a quote from you as well. You said to me once, when you are being and no longer being led by the knowledge of good and evil, we are truly free.
Yeah.
So it's about learning, it's about being versus doing versus,
Yeah.
because
Our
being doesn't,
perception of, yeah.
being is not living by that other system. So describe being. Like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
talking about?
So to me, being is coming back to who we are, our true self. That's what we refer to in the compassion method, but it's coming back to the original design of who we are, made in the image of God, which you've used the word before, magnificent.
Hmm.
When that's the center of my belief of who I am, everything flows from there. That's the
Yeah.
being, that's the enjoyment, that's the peace, that's the connection with myself and God and others, because I can just be and I don't have to do to be loved.
Hmm. You say the compassion method teaches you how to feel your pain, how to get comfort, and how to go play. Play is the being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's before the knowledge of good and evil. That was Adam
Hmm.
and Eve in the garden,
Yeah.
living, playing with no knowledge of good and evil. They were
Yeah.
full and they were comforted.
So when I think of how do I know if I'm living from that place, and a lot of it is connected to, do I sense any awe? Do I
Mm.
sense any wonder? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, That's what a little kid has when they're playing. You know,
Because they're free. Yeah.
they don't even have to have much. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
so simple,
Yeah.
but so profound. Unless we become like a little child,
Yeah.
free from the knowledge of good and evil, we can't experience in the kingdom of God, which is righteousness, peace, and joy. And that is what's available to us as we come back to our original design.
Yeah. And the exciting thing about the compassion method is it teaches you how to access what's already available.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah. And I also know that I'm on the right track when I have a sense of hope and and I have that kind of that sense of adventure,
Yeah.
like kind of like I'm embarking on a journey. Like there's this
Yeah.
sense of adventure, like you're excited,
Yeah.
like you're getting ready to go on a trip to somewhere you've never been.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And obviously, as you get older, and if you're viewing that trip through your pain lens, it might be freaking you out and causing anxiety. And you're like, I got planes and connections, and are they going to get me pick me up at the airport? Am I going to make everything on time? That's living from that other system. But if you can go back to the child who is like, someone else already took care of all that. I don't even know what missing a connection means. I'm
Yeah,
just going
exactly.
along for
Oh,
the
we get
ride.
to go play some more. It's fine.
Just
Yeah.
going along for a ride. So imagine
Yep.
having the brain power, the knowings of an adult, but being able to
Yeah. Yep.
live from
And
that
that
place.
wonder, that belief, that faith.
Yeah.
That's what faith is. That's why I think when Jesus says you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. He's
Yeah.
saying you can, if you have that faith that I believe is connected to being
Being,
our truest self,
yeah,
being childlike, being restored before the knowledge of good and evil, we can believe and hope for anything because we're not restricted by that knowledge.
yeah,
Anything's possible.
absolutely. And I think this is some of it sounds kind of, far-fetched, especially to a brain like mine, that
Yeah.
lived
Yeah.
in logic, because it's like,
Yes.
right, that ain't logical. You got bills to pay, you got
Yeah,
meetings, you
exactly.
got kids
Yep.
screaming at you, you got,
Yeah.
I don't know, employees
Yeah.
mad, customers mad, whatever, it depends on the
Yeah.
day. And then
Yeah.
there's those days when there's all of those together in one day.
Yep.
But I know that I've made progress because 6 years ago, I would have kind of like chuckled at all that a little bit, like, yeah, wishful thinking. But now it's like, yeah, I'm not living as high a percentage of my life from that place as I'd like to, but like, I can see it in a distance and like,
Yeah.
I know that destination exists.
Exactly.
I know it exists.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep going down that path towards that
Yeah.
destination because it's a pretty good one.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
reminding me of my one of my daughters. She just recently, well, like 6 months ago, gave me like one of the best compliments. She was just about to go to Guatemala to hike a volcano, and we were parting ways. We'd just been down to Mexico, and now we were at a halfway point. I was going to come back here, and they were going to go to Guatemala and hike a volcano. And we started
Sounds
sitting
like
there
a
having ice cream.
fantastic idea.
Exactly. Let's go do it. Yeah.
Fantastic idea.
And we're sitting there having ice cream before they leave. And I leave. And she goes, Mom, she goes, thank you so much for the gift of knowing I never have to worry about money. I'll always be okay.
Hmm.
She has such the gift of provision without fear. And it so abides in her that she can go anywhere and do anything, be extraordinarily generous. Does she work hard? Yeah. But she knows that
Right.
she does not have to work to strive to be able to do the things that she wants to do in life, that she can do anything. I
She's
just feel
not
like
living
that's
by
such
a
a byproduct.
system. She's not living by a system that says there has to be an X amount of dollars in my bank account for me to be okay.
Exactly. Exactly. That is
Because
it. It
guess
doesn't
what?
mean
Because
being
guess what?
irresponsible.
There
Yeah,
is no
exactly.
number that's going to make you okay.
Even
Oh,
if you have millions of dollars,
no, exactly.
you
You're
can
going to
still be
say
in fear.
$10,000. That'll do it.
Yep,
You'll get
exactly.
there. It won't do it. 100,000?
Yep,
No, no. Million? No, no.
yep.
Billions. You'd think.
Exactly.
You'd
When
think.
will it
No.
stop? Exactly. Yeah. But she lives like that, whether she has a lot or she has a little, because it's an inner belief inside of her that she can do anything and she's not restricted by finances.
And as you said, she's not irresponsible.
No, she's very responsible. She's saves
Right.
money. She wants to buy a house. She's
Right.
very responsible, but it's a bigger than that because we can be responsible all day long. But if provision doesn't abide in us, we will always be afraid.
Yeah, we will always be operating from that place of lack.
Exactly.
And when there is provision, we'll never be able to truly enjoy it.
Mm-mm. And then what happens when we lose it all? When we've been so responsible, we're always in fear until we are able
Or
to no
even
longer
if you
be
don't
ruled by
lose it
it.
all, you're worrying about losing it all. And
Exactly.
how
Yep.
do I protect it? And how do I secure it? And how do I
Exactly.
make sure it doesn't lose it
Yes.
all? You know?
Yep. Exactly.
Having a lot just brings in a whole nother worry, because that worry is how
Hmm.
do I protect myself from losing it?
Exactly. And
Or how
to
do
be
I
able
make
to be
sure I'm
okay.
a good
Yes.
steward of it? Because if I just didn't have
Yeah.
it, I wouldn't have to worry about that piece.
Exactly.
I wouldn't have to worry about being a good steward if it didn't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
So
Either way, whether you have so much resources or you have little resources, you're going to be in fear either way
that
until
knowledge
you
of good and evil
actually
system is
live in that way.
strong. It'll suck you
Exactly.
right back in a
And I feel
heartbeat.
like you see it very strongly in finances. And I know we went
Yeah.
on a little bit of a tangent, but I just want to say like that is the true fruit of living it, abiding it,
Yeah.
giving it to ourselves, giving it to our children, that they can live in that in a real, tangible way.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. And I think that leaving on that quote of when you are being and no longer being led by the knowledge of good and evil, then you are truly free. And that's what this wonderful process called the compassion method that Laura created, is teaching all of us to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. It's very
So
exciting. I'm getting excited all over again.
there you go. There's the awe and wonder. I can see it.
Yep.
I can see it. So hopefully everybody listening catches a piece of that and a reflection of that awe and wonder and are able to run with that as all of you continue on your compassion method journey. So
Yeah.
thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to next time. Goodbye.
Bye.